Well, on Saturday, we will receive the second batch of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine doses. In the last week, we've used half of the first batch, more than 40,000 doses. Professor Mosa Moshabela is the Dean of the School of Public Health at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. He suggests that as winter is coming, we should be vaccinating more than 100,000 healthcare workers a week to complete phase one before a third wave of the virus. He joins us now. Professor Moshabela, good afternoon to you. We're getting some indication of the vaccination program. It seems to be building up momentum. From what you've suggested, we're not moving nearly quickly enough.
Yes, absolutely. And I am quite aware that the scientists who are helping to implement the current rollout of the vaccine as part of the implementation trial are also fully aware of that there's not enough sites that are actually vaccinating, and they also don't cover the geographic area that they should cover in order to ensure fair distribution of the vaccine throughout the country.
In some ways, we've actually had quite a lot of time to plan for this. I mean, you could suggest that go back to March last year. We knew at some point a vaccine would come and we needed to plan for it. Has that been the problem? No planning? Or is this just a process that takes a while to build momentum?
Yeah, I think the plans were there, but these were the plans for the AstraZeneca vaccine rollout, and also based on 1 million doses. But when the results of that AstraZeneca vaccine came, it threw the spanner into the works. And now changing it to an implementation study means that government also doesn't have as much control as they had or they were going to have with the AstraZeneca vaccine. So it's almost like the mechanism for distribution changes, and that makes it difficult to follow through with the plan that was put in place. And this is now about how agile can we be, how quickly can we adapt with all these sort of curveballs that we keep encountering. That's where the issue is.
Is it that difficult to do? I mean, there are various companies that every weekend manage to put a substance in a glass vial and distribute it around the country and keep it cold at the same time. I realize a vaccine is of course incredibly different and needs to be kept in a particularly safe way. But is it really that difficult to do? Surely as a country we have the capability to do this quickly.
I have no idea what substance you're referring to, Stephen, but yes, I think it's actually not difficult to do if we engage in the process in a way that brings on board non-governmental partners and community organizations, businesses and industry. If we had such a strategy, it would not be that difficult to do. But remember that the Department of Health basically provides services and health facilities, and that's basically what they are comfortable with. And they work with the distribution systems that they normally work with, that in many ways are a little bit fixed and rigid, not as agile as we would like, especially given the current situation. So I do think that it requires a slightly different way of doing things. And because of that, it does make it a little bit more difficult than usual.
Professor, I mean, I don't know if you want to get into this debate, and I think it's going to be the subject of court action and who knows how it's going to go, but there are likely to be more and more calls for business organizations, companies, pharmacy groups, provinces in one case, to be allowed to bring in and procure their own vaccines. Now, the argument for that is that it might mean that more people get vaccinated more quickly. The argument against it, and there are plenty of arguments against it as well, is that that would lead to vaccine inequality. It would lead to a situation where the rich get vaccinated, not the more vulnerable, and that it might mean that we don't as a country get the best price for a vaccine. Do we need to change approach, or do we need to stay roughly where we are but just speed things up?
Yeah, I mean, that actually exposes the fundamental problem that we have in South Africa. You know, the lack of equity that we see in, for example, the distribution of wealth and resources. It's the very core of the problem that we have, and it's reflected now in how SARS-CoV-2 spread, how COVID-19 spread, and also in how we are going to deal with it. You know, the people who don't travel are the ones that are going to get COVID, but also when the vaccines come, the ones who cannot afford are the ones who are not going to get the vaccine. And in a way, it is very selfish to think that way and to actually think that it is okay to try and procure, to be selfish about getting the vaccine because you've got the muscle strength or muscle power or financial power, muscle to do that. I don't think that these inequitable approaches are going to be conducive. I mean, we call it lack of solidarity, and we say that we need solidarity, we need social compact, and it's very hard for people to accept that. I just think that it is a justice issue that we should not ignore. It will divide us further rather than bring us together. And if anyone knows better, they shouldn't even go there. What we need to be doing is making sure that anyone who is at risk of severe disease is getting a vaccine, whether they're getting it through the private sector, whether they're getting it through business sector or government sector or NGO sector. That is the social compact that we need. And I know I'm being idealistic here and naive of the reality that we have, but actually that is the way that the country should be going and not the other way around.
Well, when you consider that vaccines sometimes are like magic, considering the lives that they save, I don't think being idealistic is wrong at all. This is all about scarcity, in a way. It's all about scarcity. I realize it's about scarcity of more than just vaccine doses. It's about the vials that you need to transport the vaccine, the syringes, all of those things. But it's about scarcity. Now, pharmaceutical companies in the US, if I understood their testimony correctly, told their Congress in Washington this week that they expect a surplus of vaccines in the US later this year. I think in the second half of the year, call it July. Now, I realize we have issues around different variants in different countries and different vaccines. But even so, if they have a surplus, the scarcity will start to fall away, which might mean that the production will ramp up around the world, Belgium, the United States, other places here maybe. Is that going to resolve the problem, or is there still going to be other problems once the scarcity of vaccine doses is overcome?
Yeah, just like the point you're making in the country, the court cases that are going to come relate to the same problem, because then even countries that are better off feel that they need to have more access than other countries. And so it is, again, the perpetuation of the same inequality and inequity that continues to exist, not just in our country, but globally. And we have seen that many times over, and it's playing in many different ways. However, I have to say that, I think that the change in the political administration in the US gives a little bit of hope. It's not as worse or as bad as it could have been. My hope, again, would be that there would be careful thought around this and support for other countries that need the vaccine to receive the vaccine. And this is a geopolitical issue, but also it is important for diplomatic discussions and also for world peace, to make sure that we support this initiative. It's also encouraging to see Macron in France advocating for developing countries to get vaccines as well. Those with power need to be able to advocate for those who don't have power. And we also have to do the same thing in this country. We can't be pointing to the US when we are failing to actually sort it out in our own country.
In a way, for all of this to work, it's not about putting pressure on government, but it's about making sure that government does what people want it to do, which is to protect them by making sure that the vaccine rollout happens. Is there something government should be doing right now to kind of shore up confidence that it will happen? And I suppose the only way to do it is to inject so many people that we all believe that we will be next, that our families will be next in line for the injection. It's actually simply about doing it.
Well, one part of it is for government to be honest about this is what we can do and this is what we cannot do. And the second part of it is for government to say, we need help, and this is the kind of help that we need. And if they can get past those two steps, it will open up the room for everyone else. And there's a lot of people in this country who are willing to assist, who have really good ideas in identifying mechanisms that can help us roll out the vaccine quickly. At the moment, we are making the mistake, and government is also making that same mistake of seeing it as their sole responsibility. And we need to avoid that situation. We need to make this a collective responsibility rather than a government responsibility. So we have to make sure that government creates that space. And government, yes, it will still need to lead, but it needs to create the space for different partners to work together throughout this whole year to ensure that everyone who needs to be vaccinated and who wants the vaccine is vaccinated.
Professor Mosa Moshabela, really do appreciate the time. Thanks very much indeed, Head of Public Health at the University of KwaZulu-Natal.